Okay, this is going to be a series, well, not a series. This is going to be 3 videos. I'm going to do one video on epithelial, one video on connective, and one video on muscle and nervous. So this section is covering histology. Histology is the study of tissues, and a tissue, by definition, is a group of cells that have a common function. Now, there are 4 major groups, or as this outline refers to them as primary tissue types. This is on the last page of the outline, and you can see here's epithelial, here's connective, that's the biggest group, and there's muscle and nervous. And there's only a nervous tissue. There are not types, and that's one of the things about this section. Histology tissues, there are 4 groups, or what are called primary types, and then under each group you have different what are called tissue types. So I'm going to go through, try to keep these videos short. We're going to do epithelial first, and epithelial is a sheet of cells that covers a body surface or lines a body cavity. Now here's the thing, epithelial tissue always have a free space. And this is the PowerPoint that comes with this section. Here we go. There's 4 primary or major tissue types. So epithelial, yes, covers organs, lines body cavities. If you've ever seen the commercial guy talking about mesothelioma, mesothelium is a form of epithelial tissue. Have a free surface on one side and a basement membrane on the other. I'll show you a picture in a minute, some of these photos that are in here of that. They lack blood vessels. The cells readily divide. That means they have an increased rate of mitosis, which means they replace themselves fairly quickly. And I'm sorry to keep bouncing back and forth, but I was hoping maybe it had a few other extra things there, but it doesn't. All right, so which forms the outer layer of skin, dips into and lines open cavities of the urogenital, digestive, and respiratory systems. Okay, there is very little space between epithelial tissue cells. So those dark spots there are the nucleus, and the squares are the actual cells. There's very little what's called extracellular matrix or material between them. Epithelial covers the surface of the body, which is what skin is made of. Lines organ systems, we kind of covered that. Has a free space. I'll show you that in a minute what that means. Epithelial or epithelium, that's singular. You could say epithelial there as well. Is avascular, it means it does not have a direct blood supply. Epithelium has unlimited regenerative capabilities. Yes, that means it has an increased rate of mitosis. And yeah, they are classified by the layers of, well, how many layers are there and the shape of the cells. So something that is simple is one layer of cells, very thin. Something that is stratified refers to many layers, more than one. And the cell shapes can be squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. So when I'm going through, I will point these out as we go through them. So here are some functions of epithelial tissue. Yes, they do protect underlying structures, permitting the passage of a substance. Oxygen diffuses into the bloodstream across a membrane of epithelial tissue. It's called simple squamous epithelium in the lungs. The walls of the alveoli are made of that. Secreting substances, they do secrete mucus in some areas. Absorbing substances, yes. The lining of the stomach is a layer of epithelium. The lining of the small intestine, layer of epithelium. Acts as a barrier, which is like the bladder layer, does that. So here's what we're going to do. We have, here are the category, well, these are the types. So simple squamous, that's a tissue type. The group is epithelium. So for each tissue type, you have to know what is the group that it belongs to, what's the actual tissue type, where do you find it, location, and then a function. What does it do? And this being lecture, yeah, know a little bit about what it looks like. So simple squamous epithelium. So I'm going to go to the tape here, blow this up. Now you can see there's no space between the cells. So here's the nucleus, here's the nucleolus. And squamous means irregular shaped. So the cells look like kind of like like a fried egg kind of thing. So where do you find this? Lines the air sacs, lines blood vessels, lines lymphatic vessels. So over here, now this is supposed to be the drawing, and then this is a textbook version of a picture as if you're looking down on top of it. If you're looking at it from the side, it's very thin. And that's a picture from our lab. So that is some simple squamous epithelium. And you can kind of see by looking at that how thin the cells are. So, location, lining of blood lymphatic vessels, alveoli of the lungs is probably the main place. Serous membranes, which are things that line cavities and organs within the body. The parietal pleura, the visceral pleura, that kind of thing. Single flat layer of irregular shaped cells, and their function is diffusion, osmosis, and filtration. That's the main ones, those three. I know it says protection in some areas. That's the serous membranes for friction. So simple squamous, very thin, very, very thin tissue. All right, here's the next one, simple cuboidal. So if you go to the picture here, next up, and I guess I can make this big. So here is the drawing. Here's the real picture. Now this is a lining, and this is what I was referring to as a free space. See the hollow area, the white areas, it's called a lumen. That's a free space, and then the ring around that would be the actual cuboidal epithelium. And so here's the actual picture. Great, that's a cool picture from our lab. So don't worry about this pink in the middle. We're just talking about this ring of cells that goes around this follicle structure. And they are cubed shapes. The purple would be the nucleus. Some look more cube-shaped than others. But just to go back, probably the main place for this would be the lining of the kidney tubules. The kidneys filter blood, produce urine. Some other things, ducts of certain glands, they do line that. The surface of the ovaries, it's called the germinal epithelium, and then some of the capillaries in the brain. Okay, the function for this would be secretion and absorption. So I know it says active transport, facilitated diffusion, but secretion and absorption by cells would be, it says in the kidney tubules, just about anywhere. So, all right, simple columnar. Now they're column-shaped cells. Now this one I really can kind of show off what's called the free space a little bit. So there's the free space, and then you can actually see on the drawing there's the basement membrane, and the basement membrane is the area that anchors this tissue to the body. So that white area here is a hollow region, and this, where you find this simple columnar, stomach, small, large intestine, lining of the uterus, things like that. So big hollow organs. So that's the hollow area. That's the free space, and then the part that anchors it down, you can kind of see it there. But oh, I'm sorry. And then there's the real deal. So, and columnar cells have what are called goblet cells. They are, think Harry Potter, you know. They actually produce mucus. That's what that stuff coming out there. See, they're round, they're kind of gray colored. And like I said, here's the white areas, the hollow area. And then down here, and you can barely see it, there is the basement membrane, that little line that comes down that's anchoring it to this other tissue. So we're just talking about that layer right there on top, not this underneath here. That's the connective tissue proper, they call it. Including this up here. So all of this area right there. So glands and some ducts. A duct is a hollow tube. Uterus, uterine tubes, that's the fallopian tubes. Stomach, intestines, small, large. Gallbladder, bile ducts, ventricles of the brain. So a lot of the hollow organs. Single layer of tall, narrow cells, and protection, secretion, and absorption. They are thick. There's some protection to that. Secretion, because they do secrete mucus, a goblet cell. And then absorption, because areas of like the stomach absorbs water, small intestine absorbs food and water, mostly food. Large intestine absorbs water and electrolytes. And so, anyway. Pseudostratified columnar. Now, this is also called pseudostratified ciliated columnar. And this is probably the best picture of all the slides I have. Here's, you really want to find this in one area. It's the lining of the respiratory passages, the trachea, bronchi, bronchioles that go down to the lungs. So there's the cilia on top, and the white areas are goblet cells, and these cilia are sticky. They have mucus all over them from the goblet cells, and they trap dirt from air, fungus, things that you would breathe in. They would get trapped in these cilia, and then, of course, the levels here of the nuclei, it gives you the impression there's multiple layers. There's only one layer. So that's why it's called pseudostratified. And here's a real picture. There's the cilia on top. The white would be the goblet cells, and you see the nuclei at multiple layers, but that's one layer of ciliated cells. And then here is a picture from our lab. See this pink line at the bottom? There's the basement membrane. So up here would be the free space. Here's the cilia, and there's the goblet cells. But this one, you only find it in certain areas. So linings of the respiratory passages, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles. And function for this would be secretion and protection. Secretion because it does produce mucus that makes the little cilia sticky, and then protection because it is a thick layer. And plus, the cilia are trapping dirt, fungus, particles from the air, and they're moving it out of the lungs. Okay, that's the last of what are called the single layer epithelium. So we only have 3 left. Stratified squamous, we have 2 of these. We have what's called non-keratinized, and then down here we have keratinized. The non-keratinized is soft. It's basically the inside of the mouth, the esophagus, the anal canal, and vagina. And it says cornea as well there, but yeah, throat, part of the larynx, the voice box. Anyway, throat could be the same as esophagus, all right? But the inner lining of the mouth, multiple layers, function would be protection. Not a whole lot of function for that. So I'm going to go down. This is actually the keratinized, so I'm going to have to go down one more. So here is the non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. So see the multiple layers here, and they're flattening on the top. There's the basement membrane. You see that on the bottom. Same thing there. Flattened cells, and here they're round. And then this is an actual slide from our lab, and you can see, look, all those purple dots are nuclei, which means those cells are still alive. Any cell with a nucleus is still living. So that's why this is very soft. Okay, that's why if you think about the inside of your mouth, that's what this is. And you would lose this every day. The top layers come off, and then they're replaced by this bottom layer, and that's where it would stop, is right here. This bottom layer is the basement membrane. Oops, sorry. I have a zoo. Goodness. And everybody wants in here. Yeah, here's the basement membrane, and then here are the multiple layers, and like I said, they kind of flatten as they get on top. So that's the non-keratinized. The keratinized stratified squamous, now that's skin. Okay, that's the only place you find it is in the epidermis. It's a dry, tough, waterproof layer. The top layers also come off. They come off a little more readily than the inside of the mouth, of course, but the top layer of keratinized is dead. So going back up here, so this is flattened right here, and then down here is the bottom layer. That's the layer undergoing mitosis. This tissue underneath is something else. And you can see the white spaces in there. That's where the nuclei were. And this is dead. This top layer of this is dead. Because once they accumulate this protein called keratin, which is over here, this is with the K, it kills the cell. And skin is a perfect barrier. Skin is a waterproof layer. It gets sloughed off every day. Skin is actually acidic. And then, like I said, the bottom layers here are being replaced. All these layers on top. So that is the keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. And the last epithelial tissue is called transitional. Now, transitional is, you only find that in the bladder. Well, the ureters, which connect down to the bladder. Here are these two lines that come down from the kidneys. Those are ureters. The bladder and part of the urethra. And of course, it would be the linings of the ureters, the bladder, and part of the urethra. It has two functions. One is called distensibility, the ability to stretch. And the other function is protection. Now, this is an empty bladder. You see how it's all, and this is also a stratified type of tissue. There's many layers, but see how it's all stacked on top? And this is supposed to represent a full bladder, so when it's stretched out. So, and a bladder can really stretch to hold a lot of volume. Oh, you know what? I didn't show you. I have to show you the real picture of our transitional. I apologize. Our keratinized. So there's the fluffy looking transitional. So here's the free space. Somewhere down in here would be the basement membrane, but you can definitely tell that looks like it has the ability to stretch. But yeah, distensibility is a function for transitional. And here is the keratinized. So see how it's all breaking off, and I apologize for going back. I didn't show you. This is the real picture from our lab. You can see the white spaces there. That's the holes where the nuclei were. This is actually a foot, and believe it or not, all the way from there down to there is the whole tissue layer. It's very thick in the hands and feet as far as skin goes. But you can see it's breaking off. So this is the dead layer on the top. I mean, all this is dead. And so that's also the keratinized. All right. I hope this helps, and I'm going to start there next.